in your self-assessment after you took the self-assessment. Have your score sheets ready, hopefully. So here's a quick look at our roadmap. We've done podcast 2, and we're starting podcast 2 here. We still have podcast 3 and an optional podcast 4 to go. We're going to talk today about explanatory style, and that's basically how we explain things that happen, both good and bad, how we explain those to ourselves, and how we explain them to others. And they can be optimistic or pessimistic, and we look at them and categorize them in 3 different ways. Permanence, whether it's temporary or permanent; pervasiveness, whether it's specific or universal; and personal, that's internal or versus external. We're going to set up a grading sheet. We're going to set up just like this. So we'll explain what the letters mean as we go along. So the PMB, PMG, and so on. This is kind of the way to look at it, but it doesn't have to look exactly like this, but that's what we'll be looking at here. Start with permanent bad. That's going to be your PMB. Pessimists look at bad events as negative events as permanent. Optimists, on the other hand, look at them as temporary. So what you're going to do to get your PMB score, you'll add up the questions from 5, 13, 21, 20, 21, 29, 33, 42, and 46, and place that on the PMB line. Once you have those, we'll take that score. The score is going to be, if it's a low score, that's going to say that you're very optimistic as far as permanent events go. If it's between a 7 and 8, you're pessimistic. If you're in 4, that means you're about average, right in the middle. Not permanent good, how we explain good events to ourselves. For optimists, good events are permanent. For pessimists, the opposite, good events are only temporary. So I'm always lucky versus it's my lucky day. For those, we're going to take scores on, we're going to have the scores from 2, 10, 14, 15, 24, 26, 38, and 40. Put that by PMG. What this tells us is that if you have a high PMG score, that means that you're very optimistic that good events are going to continue, that they're more permanent. 4 to 5 is average. 0, 1, or 2 is pessimistic. On pervasiveness, on bad events, this pessimists view bad events as universal. All teachers are unfair, versus optimists who see bad events as specific. So an optimist would say Mr. Warner is unfair versus all teachers are unfair. For your PVB score, we're going to add up 8, 16, 17, 18, 22, 32, 44, and 48. Put that on your PVB score. Low score on this one is optimistic. High score is pessimistic. 4, once again, is in the middle. For good events, optimists see good events as universal. I'm smart. I'm charming, both of which are true. Pessimists, on the other hand, see those things as specific. So I'm smart in math, or I was charming to her. To find your PVG score, you're going to add 7, 28, 31, 34, 35, 37, and 43. Put that in your PVG list. That's pervasiveness good. And those scores, high means that you're optimistic. So 7 or 8 are optimistic. 0, 1, or 2 is pessimistic on pervasiveness good. Now we're going to look at your hope score. And the hope score is what Martin Seligman, and all this is coming from the book Learned Optimism from Martin Seligman. He says the hope score is one of the most important. This is going to judge whether you're hopeful or hopeless. And so to take those scores, we're going to add the scores from your PVB line and your PMB line. So there's 2 bad events. Add those together, and that's your hope score when it comes to bad events. If you have a low hope score, that means that you're very hopeful, tied to optimism, obviously. If you got 7 or 8, it's average. Between a 12 and 16 is considered hopeless. And as I said, this is one of the more important or scores as far as determining whether or not you'll be able to succeed when in the face of challenges. And also the same when we're talking about our kids and our students. Now the personalization. Some with low self-esteem, they internalize bad events. Someone with high self-esteem, they externalize bad events. So we're going to add up those numbers in the bottom here. 3, 9, 19, 25, 30, 39, 41, and 47. That's your personalization bad score. A low score for personalization bad is a high self-esteem. A high score means low self-esteem. Personalization good. Optimistic people internalize good events, positive events. Pessimistic externalize those. Add up the scores here at the bottom, and that'll give us your PSG score. Those scores, if you have a high personalization good score, that means you're very optimistic. You have a low score, a 0, 1, or 2, that means you're very pessimistic. Again, 4 and 5 are in the middle. So see where you're at on this in this category. Your overall score is what we're going to do is we're going to add up all the B categories, the PMB, the PVB, the PSB, add those all together to get your total B score, your bad event score. Add up the 3G categories. I think there's a misprint here. It should be PVG in the middle there, not PMG, but that'll give you your total G score, your good score. You subtract B from G, so your overall score is G minus B. A B score between 3 and 6 is optimistic. More than 14 is pessimistic. A range in between. The G score, 19 and above, is very optimistic with good scores or with a good event. A 10 or less is considered pessimistic. All right, so now you take your G score minus your B score. If it's 8 or higher, you're very optimistic across the board, across the many different categories. 6 to 8 is moderately optimistic. 3 to 5 is average. 1 or 2 is moderately pessimistic, and a 0 is very pessimistic. All right, so now let's apply this to specific events. We're looking at a school. A bad event that happens at our school is, an example would be students' ISTEP scores are below the expectations. A pessimistic explanation for this is our students are lazy and unmotivated. That's permanent, pervasive, and personal. That an alternate explanation to that, an optimistic explanation for that, is our students didn't do well as they're capable of doing, temporary, on this test, specifically to this test, because they didn't understand the importance of the assessment. It's an external and modifiable thing, so we can modify that and change that for future tests. For a good event, LMS is named a 4-star school, great event, but a pessimist might say that the reason that we received a 4-star rating was because of the way that the 4-star rating was calculated in that particular year. A pessimist would look at it as temporary, specific, and external. An alternate explanation would say that we got the 4-star rating was because we have a strong school community which strives for academic excellence. It's permanent, universal, and internal. Optimistic versus pessimistic child. How we apply this to our students. A student gets an A on the test. Optimist would say, I did well because I'm good at math. It's permanent, pervasive, and personal. Pessimist might say, I did well because the test was easy. Or on the other hand, with a negative event, so they fail on a project or they don't do well, the optimist might say, well, I didn't put as much effort into it as I could have. It's it's temporary, specific, and external, and they have something that they can work on and improve the next time. Whereas a pessimist says, I'm not good at being creative. So anything that's going to take creativity, they're not going to do very well at. So what influences child optimism? 3 main things, according to Siegelman, there's 3 main things that affect this. Mother's explanatory style, life crises, and adult criticism. So that's from teachers and parents. And so we can have a big effect on this. So let's look at that last category because that's the one we can affect. Adult criticisms, what do we say to students when they do something wrong? How do we explain it to them? And this is a study that Siegelman did back in the 90s. He looked at how it explained when boys and girls didn't do well in math. Boys, in general, he said, are energetic. They're more likely to be distracted and things like that. So they might say that they didn't do well at math because the teacher would tell them they didn't do well at math because they weren't paying attention during fractions, which is temporary and specific. So that means they can do better next time by paying attention. Girls who failed were typically girls were better behaved and less likely to be doing bad things in class. So when they didn't do well at math, it wasn't because they weren't paying attention. It was because teachers would tell them they weren't very good at math. So then that's a permanent and pervasive explanation for this. The pessimistic child, and this is a bunch of different research that's gone into this, but pessimistic children have trouble making and keeping friends. They have less support from home. They perform below academic ability. So even a student with a high IQ that's pessimistic will perform below what they're capable of doing. They're more likely to get involved in high-risk behaviors, more likely to drop out of high school, miss more days of school, and give up easily when they face challenges. They develop a sense of helplessness. The optimistic child on the other sense, has grit, pervasiveness, and curiosity. They have a more supportive social network. They perform at or above the ability level. So a student of similar IQs, optimistic children will outperform their pessimistic counterparts. The optimistic school, so putting this in a larger school context. Teachers at Optimistic School, teachers set high expectations for their students and expect them to reach those goals. Parents are valued as an important part of the educational process, and data is used as information to help improve instruction and support students. The culture of academic optimism. This is from Kent Peterson. He also called this a healthy school culture. Educators have an unwavering belief in the ability of all students, that's an important part, of all of their students to achieve success as they pass that belief on in overt and covert ways. They set policies and procedures that support the belief that the ability of every student to learn. Uh, the culture of academic pessimism, and this is also what Peterson called a toxic school culture. Educators believe that students' success is based on level of concern, attentiveness, prior knowledge, and willingness to comply with demands of schools, and they articulate that belief in overt and covert ways. How many times have we said something to a student that kind of expresses to them that the reason they're not doing well is because they're not good enough. They don't have the prior knowledge. They don't have the willingness to comply with rules. That's what's determining their success, not uh, other things that they have that they can change. Uh, how does this affect student achievement? And this is a lot of research went into this statement as well. And that's children who learn from teachers and in schools which exhibit academic optimism perform significantly better than their peers, regardless of socioeconomic status, race, and previous academic achievement. So that means that academic optimism can be the key factor that is the difference between students doing well and students not doing well, regardless, even when you control for socioeconomic status and these other demographic factors. Uh, all right, so that's kind of the big point I want to leave you with is this idea that how academic optimism can really have a strong effect on student achievement, and that's something we're going to talk about more in podcast 3. So podcast 3, we'll talk about how do we help students, how do we ourselves and students develop more academic optimism and increase our optimism, because we know what it can do as far as helping us out as far as student achievement and health and happiness and all those other good things. And then talk about some potential next steps. Really, I want to focus on, or we want to focus January 3rd, 21st on the application piece of this. But we also, we'll kind of start that ball rolling with in podcast 3, talking about what are some possible next steps. Also coming up in podcast 3, I'll show you. Well, we'll have videos, so you'll get to see my smiling face, which I'm sure you're all looking forward to. So we'll see that in podcast 3, and then I'm also going to put a toolbox on to show you how to do all these little tricks, and so you can use this in your own classes as you're teaching. So thank you for visiting podcast 2, and we'll see you again in podcast 3. Thanks.